Hello everyone and welcome to part 2 of my Crisis Core review. If you haven't watched part 1 then I heavily suggest you do. Now we left part 1 at a fairly heavy moment. Angeal is dead and Zack, now carrying the honour of his deceased friend, is left to grow and mature without a mentor. I also mentioned we'd be covering the Nibelheim incident, but unfortunately, as I've explained in part 1, this game has a tendency to spread its story around like broken pieces of china. So I'm going to try my best to shuffle all of the pieces together so this fucking broken vase of a story can make a lick of sense. Number 1, Hollander escapes. Number 2, Genesis is still alive. Does anyone care?
Not me.
Don't forget the dog.
What dog?
This dog.
Wow!
Essentially, an Angeal copy decides to save Aerith and Zack and takes up residence within Aerith's church. He comes back later, what a good boy. Now, for those of you out there, and I'm assuming it's a couple of you who may not know everything about the Nibelheim incident, it's the catalyst for everything that occurs within Final Fantasy VII. Essentially, Sephiroth is sent alongside Zack and Cloud to check up on the Nibelheim reactor. This town turns out to be Cloud's place of birth, a place he's embarrassed to show his face in, as our main girl Tifa is there, who fully expected him to be first class due to his childhood brags. Now, the Nibelheim incident is called this because it's the location where Sephiroth went from being a calm-spoken hero to a lunatic with an Oedipus complex in the space of around 6 days. This is because his mummy was named Genova, and wouldn't you know it, there's a shape-shifting alien that's being preserved within the Nibelheim reactor, also called Genova. Could this alien be Mummy? Apparently he thinks so. Make me beans on toast, Mummy. This fall from grace is something a lot of fans were dying to see with updated graphics and voice acting. And for the most part, it's dealt with pretty well. A very nice, accurate retelling of the original story.
But I did say, for the most part.
Ooh, you invasive little twat. So now, ladies and gentlemen, no matter what you thought the canon of this incident was, I'm elated to announce that Kazushige Nojima is telling you that Genesis was indeed canonically involved in Nibelheim, right at the point where Sephiroth begins to question whether or not he's actually human or a monster. I hope I don't need to go into how irritating this choice was, no matter how tiny it actually is. Instead of making me fear this villain or feel any shred of intimidation, I'm instead getting flashbacks to the time I wrote Final Fantasy VII fanfiction on Gaia Online, inserting my OC into various situations in the game and having all of the characters gasp in shock as Sephiroth's Catboy Genova clone descended into the scene. Like, who thought it was a good idea to give Gact my Gaia Online account? Who in their right goddamn mind? Other than that though, it's pretty on point. We all know how the rest goes, right? Sephiroth spends a week researching into the Genova project and comes to the conclusion that Mummy must be she. He burns Nibelheim down to the ground, gives Tifa an open-handed schlap, gets reunited with Genova, Cloud gets a little fucking cross, impales him with a strike that'll leave any normal human's torso clinging on with a piece of skin, then deals the finishing blow with a big dick move that I swear to God is the coolest thing Cloud has ever done in his Final Fantasy career. He slides into a nearly unconscious Zack's DMs with the grace of a tumbling Nana, and are then kidnapped by Shinra's lead scientist, Hojo, where his research and experiments into the Genova reunion truly begin, by injecting both Zack and Cloud with Sephiroth's Genova-infused cells. Now, in the original game, we'd skip straight from Zack and Cloud's escape from the big vat of Monster Energy drink to their journey to Midgar on the truck. Since this game has a few loose ends to tie up, however, we've still got a healthy chunk to go. It's now solely up to Zack to transport himself and a Mako-poisoned Cloud to Midgar. Shinra soldiers hot on their heels with orders to kill Zack on sight due to knowing too many of their dark secrets. His main motivation for returning is knowing that Aerith is there waiting for him, and he doesn't want the whip for not doing her dirty fucking laundry and her wish list of other things to do. One particular story thread which isn't completely tied up in my opinion is the arc with Cissnei. Cissnei very graciously decides to let Zack go free, possibly due to the circumstances of his kill-on-sight status. This, however, is where the story thread is left kind of open, almost as if they wanted to continue this further in another potential Final Fantasy VII spin-off. Cissnei is not her real name. It's later confirmed she does indeed want to tell Zack what it is, but we never actually get this reveal. Now maybe the intent was to leave us wondering, leave us with an aftertaste of mystery, but instead it just leaves me feeling unsatisfied with Cissnei's conclusion, as it really feels like the finale of her arc was swiped out from under her feet. And you'd think they would at least consider giving their new inclusion to the series a little more than just being a small motivator to Zack, and a mystery that never gets solved. Don't forget about Genesis and Hollander, you know, they're still around. So during the point where Zack is trying to get to Midgar, he's still getting bullied by Genesis and his clones, who are now hunting him in order to consume some of his DNA. Since he's been infused with Sephiroth's cells, Genesis is under the impression that since Sephiroth's cells are for all intents and purpose perfect, it'll cure the degradation process that is slowly destroying his body. This particular method fails pretty badly.
That's my hair!
Nom nom nom.
No way. He just ate my hair. Disgusting!
Now, call me stupid, but do you suppose drinking a sample of his blood may have been a safer bet? Do Sephiroth cells exist in hair follicles, or is this Genesis clone just the silliest little sausage to coexist with his fellows? Zack eventually makes it to his hometown of Gongaga, where Cissnei is predictably there waiting for him. She informs him that firstly, his parents are doing fine, and secondly, Angeal has been seen alive.
Angeal? Angeal, it is you!
Oh, okay. Well, there he goes. That was nice. Not much longer, and Zack is yet again confronted by Genesis and a now degrading Hollander, who has seemingly injected himself with Genesis's cells in order to do something.
I don't understand.
Now, if this was an intentional design choice, then bravo, that's actually kind of funny. But if not, then it's another one wing to add to the pile. But doesn't Hollander's pathetic excuse for a wing kind of resemble a chicken's? How extremely fitting. Both Genesis and Hollander tell Zack that their goal of consuming a Sephiroth cell is still in motion. Zack is apparently a failed experiment when it comes to that. But Cloud? He is apparently a specimen with a pure S cell, as they call it, and Hollander flies off to obtain it. In the fight that follows, I'll admit this is probably the best thing he does in this game, but if the world's most annoying person did a backflip, the best thing I could say in that scenario is, God, if that isn't the most annoying backflip I've ever seen. Anyways, Zack kills him. Good riddance.
Any father would be proud, okay? I couldn't do this video in the car with my son because I was so emotional I wanted to curse.
At this point, we get to see the Angeal copy who Cissnei reported, and had swooped in to save Cloud at the last minute from Hollander. This Angeal copy turns out to be none other than Lazard, the ex-director of Soldier. Why, I hear you ask, did he do this to himself? Well, it's quite simple. He wanted revenge on Hollander. Okay, do you remember when I said it was simple? So how is turning into an Angeal copy going to help you in that quest for revenge? Look, I'm sure you've noticed at this point the Crisis Core has a big habit for adding a lot of incredibly underwritten and poorly developed moments, and this is definitely one of them. No word of a lie, when this particular scene popped up the first time I played this game, I remember having to Google who Lazard even was, because he'd been out of a picture for so long. Apparently though, Genesis's tendency to get distracted by shiny, story-based objects is still pretty strong, as he's now popped off to do something else, I guess. Zack puts on his Scooby-Doo thinking hat and is all, if I was a Genesis, where would I be? Because Genesis is always carrying a dumb apple, otherwise known as a Benoran White, his super secret base must also be located in the village of Benora. Sure enough, after a little exploring, Zack finds the base Genesis used to use as a child. Here we learn that Genesis always idolized Sephiroth and wanted to share a Benoran White with him. And we also see that even as a child, he adored the play Loveless, with pieces of text claiming that 3 friends would venture forth to find the gift of the goddess. Sure enough, the play awkwardly predicts this. As further into the caverns beneath Benora, we find that Genesis has indeed found the gift of the goddess. Or at least in his mind's eye he has. Genesis now wields something called the goddess materia, and he claims that Loveless has now been fulfilled, as the 3 friends have now successfully found the gift. Angeal in the shape of his will, Sephiroth in the form of cells now a part of Zack, and of course, Genesis. Zack, still being the best little puppy boy, wants to give Genesis a chance, but he doesn't get that opportunity, as Genesis absorbs the power of the materia and transforms into the Genesis avatar. Which I'll admit, as far as designs go, isn't all too bad, but I wish the fight wasn't complete poo-poo, and the following fight with his degradation now cured is even more lackluster and easy to cheese. After beating him, we get a short FMV where Genesis, in a point between life and death, has an actual face-to-face meeting with the goddess, Minerva. Whether or not this is the self-same goddess from Loveless, or if it's the planet taking physical form, I don't think there are any real explanations for who she really is, but I'm guessing it was the latter. Genesis, fully prepared to embrace his waifu, is deeply saddened when the goddess is all, ah, psych, you Melvin, and sends him spiraling back to the incel subreddit. After this, we get a nice quiet moment where Zack takes the unconscious body of Genesis and takes him to the point where Lazard is guarding Cloud, still deep in a Marco-induced coma. In another classic tell don't show situation, Lazard tells us that Shinra attacked them while Zack was away, and because the script needed more reasons to break down Zack's spirit, the Angeal copy who saved Aerith and Zack from within the church came to rescue them. It would have been much cooler if we saw that shit. Where are the bodies, you goddamn liar? Anyways, Lazard passes away due to his wounds and the degradation process, and not long after, the Angeal copy passes away too. And despite this being incredibly shoehorned in for a gut punch to Zack's emotions without adding more pages to the script, Zack's reaction here is really genuine. This Angeal copy was like a guardian angel for Zack, a last reminder of his deceased friend. For all we know, it very well may have been the last piece of Angeal's spirit still left alive. So now he's had to witness his best friend die twice. It's lazy, but goddamn if Zack doesn't save it by being the most real thing in this game. So Zack, now left alone with a comatose Cloud and the unconscious body of Genesis, decides to fulfill Genesis's childhood wish of eating a Benoran White with Sephiroth, because as previously mentioned, his cells are now the closest thing to that. Genesis wakes up and is all rub-a-dub-dub thanks for the grub, and comments on how that dream has now been fulfilled. The conclusion to the Genesis arc comes in the form of Vice and Nero from Dirge's Cerberus fame, come to collect his body in order to integrate him into Shinra's darkest secret known as Deep Ground.
I don't care.
Now, here's a point where I have to ask the game to leave Zack alone, because not a second after everyone around him dies, he finds a stack of letters from where the Bayonetta doggy once lied, and they're all from Aerith, all 89 of them, asking if he's okay and that she wishes she knew where he was. The 89th letter is the final letter she'd be sending out to him, and this causes Zack to come to two extremely upsetting conclusions. Number one, it turns out that he was kidnapped for over 4 years by Shinra, and number two, Aerith has now given up hope about seeing him alive again. The game is now slowly reaching the conclusion, and this conclusion is where I have my biggest grievance with Crisis Core, but also where I think Tabata's direction reaches its absolute peak. This is where we see the classic truck scene with Zack speaking to Cloud, the main difference being a short moment where it appears even the Turks are concerned about their safety, Song commenting on how he has 88 letters to deliver to him. This, unfortunately, never happens, as Zack is eventually cornered by an enormous collection of Shinra troops. This is the final battle, and there is no way you can win. Being left at 1 point of health, you see the DMW portraits slowly fading away, Zack having one final memory of them as the battle rages on. Eventually though, we see him beaten down and broken by the troops, being so weak he can barely raise the Buster Sword above his head. The DMW slowly churns out an image of Aerith, and we see this short memory play out.
Hello? Don't worry, that's right, wanna hear? We're not scary at all. Will I see you again? I'll be here.
So, what was it about this ending sequence that I disagree with and that I praise? Let's start with the positive. Tabata's use of the DMW here is a stroke of absolute genius, taking one of my least favourite things about the gameplay and telling a story with it, allowing us to know that this is the final moment of Zack Fair. And something I'm not afraid to admit had me openly weeping as we see Zack's final happy memory being that of the girl he loved and will never ever see again. This is Tabata in top form, and I hope, I really genuinely hope from the bottom of my heart, that whatever project he starts in his new company away from Square Enix, he can pull off something like this again, preferably with a system which is better implemented than the DMW. But my point still stands. The issue I have with this segment, and a point I've had to explain to a few friends over the years, is Zack's battle with the horde of Shinra's soldiers. See, in the original game, we see Zack on the truck speaking to Cloud, and we then end on him being shot by a few Shinra soldiers. The implication here is that Zack, a first-class member of Soldier, was worn down to the point where a few measly ground troops could defeat him due to the complete physical exhaustion of dragging Cloud around with him from Nibelheim. In Crisis Core, however, instead of putting a stronger emphasis on Zack's gradual exhaustion from his experience with Cloud, and hell, even the mental anguish from Genesis and his peers dying, we see him fighting hundreds of Shinra soldiers and doing a pretty great job, until he gets worn down during the long fight. To me, the sadness of Zack passing away in the original comes from the idea that a man as strong as he is could be driven to the point where his superhuman strength doesn't mean a goddamn thing. It's more of a tragic story of loss during war than seeing Zack do the 1000 Heartless battle from Kingdom Hearts 2. Like, Crisis Core even gave us a reason why Zack would have been exhausted. Going from hauling Cloud around miles and miles on end, fighting a superhuman driven to an almost godlike status, and hell, if you wanted to do this soldier horde situation, then I think giving us a few extra minutes to experience battles with Shinra troops which are spread out over the plains and allow these to occur as their journey on a truck progresses will be an overall better idea, rather than have all of them gang up on him at once. This will retain that implied feeling of exhaustion from the original without injecting it with this super-powered final stand as the reasoning for said exhaustion. And the fact that the screen cuts to black here as we hear gunshots, only to see it resume with him at the point where he was in Final Fantasy VII, and ending on another cut to black with a gunshot, makes me think it would have been so much more effective to have just one final stand. This one, right here, which in my mind's eye is kind of perfect. No music, just the ambience of the surrounding landscape paired with the electronic sounds of a DMW braking in the top left corner. I understand that companies really enjoy making things bigger and better, but this is a situation where a more laid-back approach would have been much more effective and meaningful. In the final FMV of the game, Cloud is finally awake and dragging his body to where Zack is laying. Having accepted his death, he passes on the Buster Sword to Cloud and tells him he's his living legacy. All of his dreams and honor are passed on to him. A potent combination of Marco poisoning, Zack's final words, and witnessing him passing away completely breaks Cloud's mind, and he slowly trudges onto Midgar, thinking himself to be a first-class member of Soldier, and with certain personality traits eerily similar to his deceased friend. We then hear Zack asking us if he's become a hero, as the spirit of Angeal descends down from the sky to grant Zack the wings that'll allow him to fly. And so ends my video for Crisis Core, a game which suffers in so many different ways when it comes to its storytelling, having characters who feel more like an invasive OC than something which feels grounded within the game's universe, and telling us a lot of seemingly important events and expecting us to use our imaginations to fill in the gaps. But it also takes a character who we knew barely anything about and turns him into one of the most likable protagonists due to his lovable, friendly attitude and a slow mental breakdown that feels earned, even if he himself is reacting to these events like a lot of the audiences, confused and incredibly frustrated. That being said, I still do like this game. If anything, the gameplay is relaxing due to its languid simplicity and is anything but bad. Could it have been dealt with better? Well, I think we can say that about anything now, can't we? And who knows, maybe if Crisis Core is released from GAC's license owners and re-released onto the shelves, perhaps we'll see some improvements for a big console release. Play this game if you have even a passing interest in Final Fantasy VII. I think it's worth it for Zack alone, and reacting alongside him at all of the terrible twists and turns the script take can actually be kind of funny, if you're in the right mindset. It's a game made for the fans, and sadly, despite that, a lot of the fanbase is split on whether or not the new elements are welcome into this universe or not. Even a lot of panic considering the idea of Genesis ever making it into the Final Fantasy VII Remake. But I guess only time will tell. Crisis Core is this weird embodiment of Hajime Tabate's best and worst moments. But now his time has come to an end at Square Enix, maybe we can take a moment to appreciate how he took this small countryside boy from Gongaga and turned him into a hero. Well, there we have it folks, that's the end of my Crisis Core review, and for the moment, the end of my Final Fantasy VII compilation videos. I'd love to take a look at Advent Children some days, so depending on how 2019 goes, you may end up seeing that sneak into your subscription box at some stage. And speaking of Advent Children, I actually talk a little bit more about it with my friend Perils of Pokey. You can find a link to that down below, as well as credits for all of the other people who've helped me out with this project. As usual, sharing my videos around and subscribing helps me out a bunch. If you can do that for me, I'll be especially grateful. The fantastic artwork of my original character, Kate Seth, at 2 minutes 47 seconds was drawn by my good friend Sylphie. The speed at which she finishes these pieces and the overall quality at the end of it just blows my brain straight out of my skull. Please go follow her, her Twitter link is found down below, and ask her for her commission rates. She deserves it so much. If you'd like to help me out some more, then please consider pledging to my Patreon, which is found on the link just below this video. If you want to join the gorgeous names on the right hand side, then it's only a single $1. $3 gives you access to scripts and outtakes, and $5 grants you access to my podcast a few days early. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.